Welcome to a place where stories of love are told not with fairy tales, but with truth raw, vulnerable, and unforgettable. Here, love isn't polished or perfect. It's messy, it's forbidden, it's terrifying, and it's beautiful. These are the moments when laughter turns into longing, when silence becomes heavy with desire, when a single touch shatters years of loneliness. This is where stolen glances become sparks, sparks become fire, and fire becomes the kind of awakening that changes everything forever. In these stories, guilt and passion collide, fear and longing dance together, and hidden truths rise to the surface. Every word you'll hear is spoken as if from the soul of someone who has lived it, breathed it, and never been the same again. So if you've ever craved love that feels dangerous but pure, stay with me, because what you'll hear next might stir something you've kept buried for years. It started in such a simple way, almost too ordinary to imagine how it could ever turn into something that would change everything. He was always around the house, always laughing, always carrying that youthful energy that seemed to make the whole room lighter. At first, it was easy to see him as nothing more than what he was supposed to be, someone close to the family, someone whose presence was normal, comfortable, and safe. We'd talk casually, mostly about small things that didn't matter much. A passing comment about the weather, a joke about the game on TV, light-hearted things that filled the silence but didn't stir anything deeper. But as time went on, something shifted in ways I couldn't control. It wasn't dramatic. It was in the way his eyes lingered a little longer, as though he was seeing past the surface. It was in the way his laugh would trail off into silence, leaving a charged pause between us that felt heavier than words. I tried to brush it off, to convince myself it was just imagination, just a trick of my mind, but every time his gaze met mine, I felt the warmth spreading inside, a kind of dangerous sweetness that left me restless when he wasn't around. It wasn't supposed to feel that way. It wasn't supposed to mean anything more than the easy bond we shared. And yet, the living room became a stage for stolen moments, moments so quiet they could almost be denied, but so powerful they lived in me long after the room emptied. A touch of his hand against mine when reaching for the same glass, a playful nudge that lingered a fraction too long, a smile that carried something unspoken. None of it was planned. None of it was meant to happen. But it did. I found myself noticing little things that should have passed unnoticed: the curve of his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the sound of his voice when it dropped low at the end of a sentence. Things that once blended into the background now stood out like fire in the dark. I caught myself waiting for his arrival, pretending not to, but feeling the pull grow stronger with every passing day. The air between us began to feel heavy, like it was charged with something invisible, something dangerous but magnetic. He must have felt it too, though neither of us dared to say it out loud. There were glances, quick and fleeting, that spoke louder than words could. Glances that asked questions we weren't supposed to ask, that hinted at things we weren't supposed to feel. And sometimes those glances held too long, stretching into silence so thick it was almost unbearable. The sound of laughter would fade, and in its place came a tension that clung to the skin, begging for release. There were moments I wanted to pull away, to break the invisible thread tying me to him. But every time I tried, the thread only seemed to tighten. The living room, once a simple and ordinary space, became a world of its own. The couch we sat on felt smaller than it was, the air around us warmer, the conversations heavier. Every laugh, every shared secret, every pause between sentences became a step closer to something I couldn't admit, but couldn't resist. The spark didn't explode all at once. It burned slowly, quietly, in the background of every ordinary day. It was in the way his eyes seemed to search for mine across the room, in the way I felt my heartbeat quicken when his shoulder brushed against me. It was in the quiet moments when we were left alone, and the silence wasn't awkward but alive, pulsing with everything we weren't saying. Sometimes, late at night when the house was quiet and I was left alone with my thoughts, I replayed those moments in my mind. I told myself it was wrong, that it could never be more than what it was, but my body betrayed me. My chest would tighten, my breath would quicken, and the memory of his smile would linger until sleep finally claimed me. The more I tried to bury it, the more it rose back up, stronger than before. It was dangerous, that spark. Dangerous because it made me feel alive in ways I hadn't felt in years. Dangerous because it reminded me of the parts of myself I thought had faded away, the parts that longed to be seen, desired, wanted. His presence awakened something I didn't even realize had been asleep. That hunger for connection, that ache for something real and consuming, it was all stirred awake by something as simple as laughter in the living room. I didn't plan it and I didn't welcome it, but once it started, there was no turning back. Every time I tried to convince myself it was nothing, the next glance, the next touch, the next laugh proved me wrong. It wasn't nothing, it was everything, a forbidden sweetness that hung in the air, waiting for the moment when it could no longer be ignored. And deep down I knew, one day, one moment, it would break free. It happened on a night that seemed no different from any other. The house was wrapped in silence, the kind of silence that feels almost too heavy, too perfect, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. The air carried that strange stillness, the weight of secrets waiting in the shadows. Every door was closed, every light dimmed, and for the first time in a long while, I was aware of how alive the night felt, how close everything suddenly seemed. He was there, just as he had been so many times before, familiar yet unfamiliar all at once. The distance that usually protected us, that invisible line neither of us had dared to cross, felt thinner that night, fragile like glass on the verge of breaking. We sat too close but not close enough. We spoke in whispers though there was no one to hear. Every word, every laugh, every pause felt heavier than it should, like it carried more meaning than the surface allowed. I could feel the pull. It was in the way his eyes lingered when they should have turned away. It was in the way the air between us warmed, in the way my pulse quickened without reason. I wanted to resist it, to push it down, to remind myself of all the reasons it should never happen. But the more I resisted, the stronger it grew, until resisting felt impossible, almost cruel to myself. And then it happened, not planned, not spoken, not even imagined in the way it unfolded. A touch, so small, so unintentional, and yet it lit a fire I didn't know was waiting to burn. His hand brushed against mine, and instead of pulling away, I stayed. That single choice, that refusal to move, cracked open a door we both had been circling for so long. The warmth of his skin spread through me like lightning. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and in that one instant, years of emptiness collapsed. The hunger I thought I had buried, the ache I had silenced for so long, came rushing back with terrifying force. It wasn't just desire. It was something deeper, rawer, like my body and soul remembered what it meant to be wanted, to be touched, to be seen. His eyes met mine, and the silence between us became unbearable. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. The truth was already there, alive and undeniable. Slowly, almost as if testing the world itself, his fingers curled into mine and the world shifted. That small, simple act shattered the walls we had carefully built, and in their place came a flood of emotion too powerful to stop. I leaned into it, not because I decided to, but because my body refused to do anything else. His breath was warm against my cheek, his presence overwhelming, and when his lips finally touched mine, the fire consumed everything. It wasn't soft or tentative. It was desperate, hungry, filled with all the nights of silence and longing that had led us to this moment. It was a kiss that felt like confession, like surrender, like truth. My hands trembled against him, not from fear, but from the weight of what was happening. Every nerve, every inch of me came alive, as if awakened after years of sleep. The loneliness that had lived inside me, heavy and constant, seemed to melt in his arms. Every touch burned away the cold. Every caress whispered a promise I didn't know I had been waiting for. The house remained silent, but inside I was breaking apart and being rebuilt all at once. It was terrifying because I knew once this line was crossed, there would be no going back. It was irresistible because every part of me craved it, begged for it, clung to it as though it was the only thing that mattered. I felt his hands on me, tentative at first, then certain, claiming me in ways no one had in years. The hunger grew, spilling over, unstoppable, and I let it take me. My body responded before my mind could catch up, as if it had been waiting for this very night, this very moment, to remember itself. There was no guilt then, no thought of what tomorrow might bring. There was only the fire, only the sweetness of being touched where I thought I could never be touched again. Only the sound of his breath mixing with mine, the pounding of my heart against his, the way time seemed to vanish, leaving only us. The fear of being discovered, the shame of what it meant, all of it should have stopped me, but nothing did. The hunger had been locked away too long, and now it was free, roaring through me with a force I couldn't resist. I gave into it, into him, into the moment that swallowed us whole. When it was over, when the fire finally slowed into embers, the silence of the house returned, but it wasn't the same silence. It was thicker, heavier, filled with the echo of everything that had just happened. I knew the world outside those walls would never understand. I knew tomorrow would bring questions and consequences I wasn't ready for, but none of that mattered then, because for the first time in years, I felt alive. The kiss was supposed to end there, quick and fleeting, something that could be dismissed as a mistake if either of us had the strength to pull away. But it didn't end. The moment our lips touched, something opened inside me that I could no longer control. It spread through my body like a flood, washing away every barrier I had carefully built, drowning every excuse and every reason in a tide of feeling too powerful to deny. It wasn't gentle, not at first. It was raw, almost desperate, as though we both knew we had been holding back for far too long. My breath tangled with his, my chest pressed against his, and in the heat of that moment, the world disappeared. Nothing existed but the fire between us. Nothing mattered but the way his mouth claimed mine like it belonged there. I could taste the danger, the sweetness, the hunger that had been hiding in plain sight, waiting for its chance to consume us both. The walls I had carried for years, walls of restraint, of propriety, of silent loneliness, crumbled with each touch. His hands trembled against me, but they didn't let go. They searched, they claimed, they told truths I had been starving to hear without a single word spoken. My body answered him instinctively, moving closer, clinging tighter, begging for more without thought or hesitation. It was as if every inch of me remembered something I had forgotten, something buried beneath years of silence and emptiness. Every kiss deepened, every touch pulled me further into the storm. The guilt was there, sharp and heavy in the back of my mind, whispering that this was forbidden, that this was dangerous, but the guilt couldn't compete with the rush of desire flooding through me. It couldn't silence the way my skin burned wherever he touched me, the way my heart pounded like it was trying to break free from my chest. Desire shouted louder than guilt, and connection spoke louder than both. I felt myself unravel in his arms, years of holding everything together, years of pretending not to feel, years of hiding the ache of being unseen. They all collapsed in that flood. He pulled me closer, and I let myself fall, not caring where the current would take me. His breath was hot against my neck, his hands desperate, His body pressed hard against mine, and in all of it I felt something terrifyingly pure, because beneath the hunger, beneath the fire, there was tenderness. A tenderness that scared me more than the desire itself. Every time his lips slowed, softening against mine, every time his hands lingered not in urgency, but in reverence, I felt the truth of it. This wasn't just about lust. This wasn't just about the danger of what we were doing. This was about being seen, being wanted, being cherished in a way that stripped me down to nothing but the core of who I was, the guilt twisted inside me, trying to remind me of what this meant, of what could never be undone. But each time doubt rose, his touch dissolved it, replacing it with warmth, with certainty, with a need that felt like it had been carved into my very bones. I couldn't fight it. I didn't want to. The room was silent except for our breaths, uneven and heavy, and the sound of our bodies shifting closer, as though we could erase every trace of space between us. His mouth moved against mine, slow now, tasting, savoring, as if he too understood the gravity of what we had unleashed. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from regret, but from the overwhelming force of it all, the realization that I was alive, that I could still feel this deeply, this completely, after believing that part of me was long gone. It was more than passion, it was confession, it was surrender. Every kiss said the words we couldn't speak. Every touch carried truths that language would never capture. In those moments, we told each other everything without saying a single thing. My hands tangled in his hair, my body molded against his, and still, it never felt close enough. The need to be consumed, to be lost in him, grew with every second, until I wasn't sure where I ended and he began. The weight of what we were doing pressed against me, but so did the undeniable purity of it, because even in the fire, even in the hunger, there was a softness, a gentleness that said this was more than desire. This was connection. This was the kind of truth that can't be denied, no matter how forbidden, no matter how impossible. I thought I would drown in it. The flood of emotion was too strong, too overwhelming. And yet, instead of drowning, I felt like I was breathing for the first time. The ache of loneliness, the emptiness I had carried like a shadow, was gone. In its place was fullness, heat, life. My body trembled, my heart raced, my soul ached with the force of it all. We stayed there, tangled in each other, caught in a storm that neither of us wanted to escape. Every kiss, every breath, every desperate touch pulled us deeper, until time itself disappeared. There was no night, no day, no future, no past, only this. Only us, only the raw, unshakable truth that whatever this was, it had already changed everything. When it finally slowed, when our lips parted but our foreheads rested together, I felt the weight of silence settle once more. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It was heavy with meaning, with promises unspoken, with truths too dangerous to voice. My chest rose and fell against his, our breaths still tangled, our hearts still pounding in rhythm. And in that silence I knew what began as a single kiss had become something that could never be undone. When the first light of dawn slipped through the curtains, everything felt different. The world outside was the same quiet streets, trees swaying gently in the morning air, a sky painted soft with the colors of sunrise. But inside, within the walls that had held the night's fire, nothing would ever be the same again. My body was still warm, my lips still tingled, and my heart, restless and alive, beat in a way I hadn't known it could. I lay there in the silence, every breath heavy with the truth of what had happened, knowing that a line had been crossed, knowing that it could never be undone. At first I tried to steady myself, tried to tell my mind that it had only been a moment of weakness, a mistake, something that would fade in the light of day. But the more I thought it, the less it felt true. It hadn't been just a moment, it hadn't been just hunger or desire. It had been something deeper, something raw and terrifyingly pure. I had been touched in a way that reached beyond the body. I had been seen completely and wanted not for duty, not for expectation, but for the very essence of who I was. That truth could not be erased by daylight. The fear was there, heavy and sharp, curling in my chest. Fear of what it meant, fear of the judgment, fear of the world's eyes if it ever saw. My thoughts raced with all the reasons it should never have happened, all the consequences waiting like shadows outside the door. But beneath that fear, stronger still, was the longing, the ache to hold onto it, to not let it slip away. The memory of his touch, his breath, his eyes looking into mine. It burned brighter than any fear could dim. Every detail of the night replayed in my mind, over and over, with unbearable clarity. The way his hand had found mine in the quiet, the way his lips had claimed me like he had been waiting a lifetime, the way his body trembled as much as mine did. It wasn't just a forbidden encounter. It wasn't something reckless or careless. It had been an awakening. A door opened inside me that I could never close again. I was alive in a way I hadn't been for years, alive in a way I had almost convinced myself I no longer could be. And that was what scared me most, because once you've been awakened, once you've been touched that deeply, how do you return to silence? How do you go back to being unseen, untouched, unheard? The thought of it hollowed me out, even as the warmth of the night still lingered in my skin. I couldn't imagine going back to the emptiness, to the coldness, to the quiet ache I had lived with for so long. He looked at me when the morning light fell across his face, and in his eyes I saw the truth. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't ashamed. There was fear there too, yes, the same fear I felt, but there was something stronger, an honesty, a tenderness that told me he had felt it too, that I hadn't been alone in the fire, that it had consumed him just as completely as it had me. That look, soft and unflinching, was enough to tell me that what had happened was not just a night to forget. It was the beginning of something we both knew would change us forever. I wanted to speak, to say something that could make sense of it, but words felt too fragile. Words would have broken the spell, and I wasn't ready for that. So instead, I let silence speak for me, let my hand rest against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath my palm. It beat fast but strong, and in its rhythm I heard the same truth echoing back to me. We were no longer who we had been yesterday. The weight of what lay ahead pressed on me, the uncertainty of what this would mean, the knowledge that the world outside would never accept it. But in that moment, I didn't care. The fear was real, yes, but so was the longing, so was the truth. And I knew then, as dawn painted the sky in gold, that I would rather live with the danger of being awakened than return to the safety of being numb. I rose slowly, every movement heavy with the weight of the night behind me. The floor felt colder beneath my feet, the air sharper, but even then I carried the warmth with me. His gaze followed me, steady and silent, and in that gaze was the promise I didn't dare put into words. Nothing would ever be the same again, and I didn't want it to be. Thank you for letting this story live inside you tonight. If it touched something in your heart, if it stirred memories or awakened feelings you thought were gone, then let it stay with you. Love, real love, is never neat, never easy, but it is always worth remembering. If you want more stories that reach deep into the soul, that uncover the hidden truths of passion, longing, and connection, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes in love's power to transform. Until next time, hold on to the moments that made you feel alive.